peek behind the curtain of the Softly Training Lab with the Softly Performance Podcast. The pinnacle of human performance is out there, and we intend to find it.
Welcome to the next episode of the Softly Performance Podcast. With me today, I have Coach Matt and special guest once again, Brent, even though this is his podcast technically. But today we're talking about, so I saw this guy.
It's your podcast.
Lord of Lips is how I know him. He's in the Army. I believe he's a sergeant major. And he said he got hit by the Good Idea Ferry. He was talking about H2F and how with H2F, perhaps they can, instead of hiring contractors, make it an MOS, a military occupational specialty, to be a strength coach. As if this was a new concept.
Yeah, nobody's ever done that before. Armed services.
I can't hear you. It might just be a lag.
I think it's a lag.
To
Let's let him go.
A self-run program, an MOS. So we're going to lean on Matt heavily today because I want to know the pros and cons, because I have some unfounded concerns, things that must be considered if we were to undergo such a route. I'm thinking of doctrine and dogma. So all that being said, Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, maybe for people who aren't currently serving here, do you want to set the scene? Like, what's the setup like at the moment in terms of how does it work with H2F and other schemes like that? So like, is it POTIF? Is that the SF one or one of the SF ones? Like, how does that work? How does it work with people who are already enlisted and have like physical training quals? Like what's the lay of the land at the moment?
G, do you want me to talk about that, or do you want to talk about that? Okay. I'm going to dumb it down a bit more and try to not use like acronyms and jargon, but the way that it typically is working at most of the units, at least within the SOCOM enterprise, is you have a contracted coach. At some of the organizations, you'll have, like I just talked to a guy at a Army Special Forces group who was in charge of their their human performance program at group level, and he was a E8 in the Army. So he was active duty in charge of the program, so he had coaches underneath him. That's a relatively novel concept as far as I know. Typically, the way it works is the contracted, the civilian strength conditioning coach, and I'm kind of broad brush stroking all of them with the same title, moniker, whatever, is going to be on their own, and they will have a like contracting officer in charge of them, but they're not going to have anybody who actually knows human performance above them. And what that typically equates to is the leadership, meaning military leadership above them, commanding officer, sergeant major, whoever that is, that kind of informally starts to bogart that piece and takes it on as their own, is going to bleed their flavor of the day into the training. So what you'll see is you get a new commanding officer that's a big runner, and now he's like, yeah, all my guys need to be ultra marathon runners. Or you'll get one in that played football. Hey, I want us all to bang weights like we did, my high school football team, et cetera, and you get a big sprinkling of flavor of the day. Gee, you and I have both seen that at various units, like literally tippy top pinnacle units down to, the train the trainer type of deal. What I have seen on the active duty side at like infantry units and other like line units, not special operations units, is a large focus on getting guys trained so that they're like an active duty trainer as a secondary duty, but not an MOS, if that makes sense. And you've seen this ebb and flow through the services, but I'm unaware of, hopefully somebody tells us if there is now, but I'm unaware of any MOS that's like, you're a strength conditioning coach, like you were in the British.
Yeah.
The only thing I've seen that's close to that is physical therapy. And the thing that bugs me about that is it's very much, I had the opportunity to work with Grom for a course or two. I can't remember. It's been a long time. But the lack of integration between physical therapy and strength conditioning coaches was vast. It was a huge gap. And what is integration? It is, if I go to the physical therapist and I'm like, hey, I got this guy doing rear foot elevated split squat for reps. Here's the loads that he's working at. We're seeing on the force plates, we're seeing this much force absorption when his peers are doing X. The physical therapist shouldn't look at me like I'm from fucking Mars. And what I mean by that is the PTs that I was observing were very clinical, almost, if I had to paint with a brush, inpatient. When it came to sport, that wasn't in their realm of expertise. It wasn't. It was very clear. And you almost saw it in how the operators viewed them. Avoid. They didn't want to fucking work with those people. Whereas the strength and conditioning coaches, they tolerated. So So anyway, I say that because that's in the DoD, what I've been seeing, and I'm speaking just from my observation. I'm not saying this is how it is. It's just that the PTs are very on the more clinical side, not like in Europe, just more clinical and not necessarily programming strength and conditioning loads. However, there's some places, and they know who they are, where they do have good integration, but they are the exception.
So this is, I don't want to be like arse about face, because we haven't kind of done any lead into this. But the specialization, so the sub-specialization. So I was a physical training instructor by specialization. That was my, to use your terminology, my MOS. So through basic training, then I went straight to physical training school, if you like. But then my sub-spec was ERI, so exercise rehab instructor. And essentially, the entire focus of that role is to bridge that gap between physio, between clinic, and then what we call like mainstream PTI. So the guys that are like in the gyms kind of taking what would be S&C in this case. So that's specifically the role of the ERIs, that you're like kind of that bridge in the gap. It's not a perfect model, but that's kind of what I think you're after.
I almost think that role is more important and pivotal to a higher level, like whether that's a special operations, a higher level person in the military, like they've been around the block your past 2 years, let's call it. That bridge component is kind of, in my mind, what most strength and conditioning coaches should really look like for those guys, because you've got a base, you've got a foundation, right? And what I've seen of the guys that were, whether they were a strength and conditioning coach who really took a liking to and an interest in the physical therapy side, or a physical therapist who started to look at the strength and conditioning side, those were the ones that were good. Everybody else, it was almost like, get the fuck away from me. I don't want to talk to you. You don't know what you're doing. On the strength and conditioning side, when that's all they did, it was like, dude, the laundry list of injuries that guys have, blah, 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 blah. You're like, you're just going to fucking break people doing the thing you want to do. And then on the PT side, like, hey, you're probably great for geriatrics, but like, you can't tell me don't squat anymore, or don't like these broad brush strokes that you're painting athletes with don't work, right? Like, your goal is to get them off the table to somebody else. And I kind of didn't have a use for them unless they were somebody who they could either be a PT or a strength and conditioning coach, but they had to like reach across the aisle and understand and take interest in the other side of what they did.
I think perhaps this is why I'm interested and I kind of stay in the sports side, because you just don't see that as much. It does happen, but there's less room to hide. Like when you're working
you don't see it as much specifically in the organizations that you've been with, because it's a priority to have the crossover.
Yeah, right. And just to put things in perspective for people, if they're not aware, Exos was one of the first organizations to have really good integration, to have the physical therapist and dietitian, the strength coach, all talking to each other, all on the same page. It's normal now. But back when POTIF was first incepted, they went to Exos at the time, Athletes Performance, because of that integration. And what you saw, now it's much better now, but what
POTIF,
you saw,
for those listening, is preservation of the force
and family.
Like, hell yeah, and family.
Yeah, don't forget that part.
It's supposed to be that like mind, body, spirit, integration, trying to keep guys in service, on active duty, able to perform the task longer, given the insane investment into a special operation.
100%. Yeah. And so what you tend to see, now this is the reason I'm looking up in a way, is because I'm thinking about the challenges that making that an MOS would bring. Because again, I use the word doctrine. These guys, everybody in the military knows that you're not necessarily going to be at the same duty station for your whole career. It is not unusual to rotate every 1 to 3 years or so on average. Would you say that's about right, Brent?
That depends on your
The
MOS,
unit,
the unit, etc. In special operations, you get longer. Guys are going to be on station longer, 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
In one spot.
That seems okay then.
It's and often when they rotate, it's to a schoolhouse that's local. Like, a lot of the units are kind of homesteading guys, for lack of a better term, where they're not having to go like East Coast to West Coast, back to West Coast to Japan, etc. Obviously, that situation does exist. Okinawa, when I started in Okinawa, and in hindsight, it was a bit of a penal colony. Like, you had a lot of new guys, and most of your senior guys, they fell into two buckets. We had a lot of senior guys in rank who were relatively new reconnaissance Marines, And not everybody, I'm like whitewashing an entire fucking battalion out there. Not everybody fell into these buckets, but when I was there, most of the guys fell into these buckets. They either were relatively new to the MOS, new to the Marine Corps entirely, or they had fucked up and their penance was like, off to Okinawa you go, right? They had a DUI, they had, whatever it was. That being said, some of those dudes were complete fucking rock stars for the thing I went in, the war was kicking. I wanted the rock star on the battlefield and didn't give a shit if he was a risk in his off time, right? Getting into fights, etc. Drinking and driving. We didn't care as much about that, frankly, as we should have. It was like, cool, this guy can run a machine gun or sniper rifle or whatever he does. Like, awesome. But aside from there, you didn't see guys bouncing around a ton. And that was a bit of an outlier. Go ahead.
I was going to say the reason I bring that up is because you brought this up earlier with, let's say, the person who he runs all the time, so therefore everyone must run. When you have that rotation, you don't have this anchor that people can draw from as far as founding principles, so to speak. I mean, if you think about it, the Army, the Marine Corps, they all have their principles, but when it comes to strength and conditioning, there isn't anything concrete. So my concern with making those MOS based is somebody at Training and Doctrine Command is going to be buddy-buddy with people who may not be the best experts. I'm thinking of pose running and debacle there with the Army, where they championed pose running for a long time.
And made it doctrine.
Even though it's not rooted in anything concrete. There's some good lessons there, but I wouldn't want soldiers to be like, I do pose running all the fucking time. Like, no, like, you're going to break the rules. Like, the very nature of the shit you have to wear is anti-pose running. So,
yeah, I'm a big pose running fan, by the way, but making that doctrine was probably not the move.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, we shouldn't, that's my other concern. Like, what if you got a fucking hardcore West Side barbell guy in the room, so to speak? Yeah, strength is important, but
I saw this a ton. Like, and the other thing we had a higher turnover of strength and conditioning coaches than I would have thought we should, in my opinion. And there's a whole shitload of factors that go into that, including the contracting vehicles. And, you're not hiring Matt, you're hiring Softfleet, right? And so now, Matt gets into it with Brent. Brent's like, fuck you, you're fired. Softfleet still has the contract, but you lose the amazing coach that you had that, maybe had tenure, was fully aligned with the guys, had bought in, there was trust built, etc. And not that it was a fully revolving door, but a bit of a revolving door at a lot of units. And then I've seen other units where like they've had the same strength, and there's a strength conditioning coach out on the West Coast in the SEAL teams that has been there since we started. I mean, they've been there 11 years. And maybe longer than that. There's some that really have been able to hold on to talent, but I think that's more of the exception.
Well, that was something I was going to ask you earlier, when you used Exos as an example. So I think one of the things that is really important with, and Bren kind of touched on it earlier, one of the things that's really important if you're considering either an MOS or just embed with like an embed with a civvy, like a contractor, I think it's having someone in an oversight position who has got experience and buy-in with both worlds, who like understands maybe not necessarily the nuts and bolts of S&C, but understands human performance kind of more generally, and then understands what the requirements are like in whatever it is you're getting that person in that position for. And almost like you'd have like an athletic director in a sporting program. Having someone that kind of has oversight of both worlds, I think, is huge. And interestingly, I don't want to talk too much out of turn, but that's something that we were lacking while I was serving in the RAF, in the Royal Air Force, is we had a strategic defense review in 2010, and they got rid of essentially the physical training officer. So they got rid of that role, and instead they were using officers who were trained in like admin, that kind of stuff. They were rotating into those roles. So it works really well as long as you've got like a senior SNCO who like knows their stuff and it is okay to push back. Or it works really well when you've got someone who's in that oversight position who's willing to learn or has some kind of understanding. But that's completely kind of by chance. They might be super into accounting and they just happen to get put in,
That's so frustrating, man.
How did you guys do it in Exos? Like who was in that position?
Okay,
but Exos is different because it was a this is a very different thing in my opinion because it's a private entity. So they can lay down the principled approach and it's like you come to them and pay the dollar to train versus at a unit trying to homestead it. It's so different.
Yeah.
Because Exos has had the revolving door of customers, right? You may have had Giovanni there for a decade or whoever it is. Like Softly's the same thing, but the customer base is a revolving door because of the same deal, flavor of the day. Like, oh, I don't want Exos now. I want
no, I fully see that. I guess more I'm going after is like, maybe I'll frame it a different way. Like, who owns the care of the person? Like, who
ultimately
is there someone who has oversight on like, okay, this is what PT's doing, this is what nutrition's doing, this is what S&C's doing. I'm gonna like make sure I'm coordinating all those things. Is there someone in that?
Yeah, there's a
kind of pulling
director.
the strings?
Yeah, there's a performance director. At what you're describing is a higher level unit. So that does happen. How efficacious they are, like I think it depends on the person, but all the ones that I've met know what the hell they're doing. And they're working within the bounds of the system. They're kind of, so that it's kind of like a football team. Like, let's say the Steelers sending me an athlete. So they have their AD or their AD or their director of medicine or whatever. And I might have a conversation with them about where that athlete's at. So military is very much the same. Where it's different, I think, is with the military, in my mind, there are some people, and I'm calling out civilian coaches for this, that have the opportunity to do what I did. They look at it as, oh, I gotta increase their performance in X amount of time, which if you only have the guys for a week, you're thinking of it as a training camp like you would for a pro athlete. But when they go home, they're not going to have necessarily the same level of expertise and care there at their home like an NFL team would. So my job was about education. But here's the thing with the education piece, and Brent knows about this. It's not unusual with the military forces. Brent, I don't even know what the Marine Corps calls them. But with the Navy, you have command fitness leaders, CFLs, and then the Army has master fitness trainers. These are courses that you can send people to, enlisted people or officers if they want, and go learn about, I'm using big quotes here, strength and conditioning. And it's a trap because it's frustrating because they're like, oh, well, we could teach everything you need to know in 2 weeks. And then we go back to this idea of doctrine and whether or not it's based in, let's say, the current understanding. My job was not to make them a CFL. My job was to educate Brent on why he needs to think about rotational integrity of the knee. Whereas, Matt, if you were in an operator in the military, it might be something completely different for you, not make you a CFL. That's a fucking trap. I can't teach you 20 years of experience in fucking 2 weeks, but I can teach you, Brent, here's how you got to take care of your knee. So we see the challenge there as far as making it an MOS. And then let's think about, let's just paint a broad brush. Like, how many people do we know in the military that are like, they had no other option? Do you really want that guy to be in charge of your training? So,
well, the other issue is like the continuity and longevity piece, I think, is a massively missing component to success of high level units. So the highest level units have tenure is a thing. You're there a long time, 10, 20 years at that unit.
Yeah.
The places where that's not a thing typically are not as high level. And so if you're rotating guys in and out, I've had this theory with the US military. It ties into two things. The British military is better about this, but it should be, in my opinion, a bit more of a revolving door and shorter amounts of commitment to stick around. Meaning in the British military, you can do like perpetual 1-year enlistments, right? You can like re-up another year, re-up another year, re-up another year.
So it doesn't even work like, well, I can speak from my experience, it doesn't even work like that. Typically you'll sign on for an initial engagement, but once you've served back the time equivalent of what it cost them to train you, then you can say, yeah, I'm done. And
whenever,
depending on
right?
what your role is, there might be like a kind of wait time to get out.
Yeah.
But,
so the last time, and I might be confusing, you're going to laugh at this, but I may be confusing conversations with some of my British counterparts and my Australian counterparts and the way their service was working. But it was both of them. There was and these were either, I'm looking back, it was either, I think 2 para is the British unit that I was talking to the guy, or like the Australian commandos, which is like their equivalent to a ranger battalion type of thing. It was a much shorter commitment, and they saw guys stick around longer. Because if you think about like, hey man, we just need you for 1 more year, 1 more deployment, you could do that and self-talk your way into that for a long fucking time. Whereas the U.S. SOCOM enterprise is like, hey, man, we'll give you more money to stick in for 5 more years, not 4. And you're like, ooh, half a decade that's a fucking prison sentence in a lot of guys' mind, right? You're like, man, I'm doing another nickel at Camp Lejeune, right? I think that it's the same thing with the strength and conditioning side. When you make this an MOS, you're cutting out a lot of opportunity. You know, the argument is we're like, well, a guy can't just leave after 2 years. He's stuck in this for 4 or 5. And it's like, yeah, but you're only going to get him for 4 or 5, right? Whereas if you make this a ability to, or even leave, come back, like, you know, out processing it isn't as big of a deal, I think you would get a lot more guys that were like, you know, fuck it, I'm going to take a break from corporate America for 3 years and go back to the Marines or whatever it is without it being this impossible task. But I think if you made it a little bit easier to come and go, what you'd end up with is guys had that sense of freedom that at least in America we value, and you'd keep guys longer. On the strength and conditioning side, I think you would, it's counterproductive in a lot of minds, but when you guys have that freedom, I think you'll keep them around and get that tenure that you want and that continuity and actually be able to like really build a culture that matters versus, you know, flavor of the day, battalion commander, group commander, whatever unit you're at. Like, oh, okay, this guy's here for 3 years. It's going to be his baby. And then the next guy's got a totally different vision.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think maybe there's the compromises, you know, with if we made that an MOS, strength and conditioning coach or exercise rehab specialist, whatever, if you give them the option of a shorter enlistment as the norm.
Yeah. Maybe it's like you do year, or 2 years, 2 years, 2 years, whatever it is. And I may be mixing it up where like, the year thing came around bonus talks because I can't remember if it was the Australian dude or the British dude who I talked to this about, but it was every year that he was getting a bonus. So like you could play it another year, it was an annual bonus type of thing. And again, this is a decade plus ago at this point, but it was an interesting concept to me of like, yeah, you could walk, you know, pretty much whenever you want. Like in the military, we start planning our exit 6 to 12 months out of like, oh, you got to go through all this transition stuff, blah, 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 blah. And that's obviously a failing mechanism of getting out of the military as it is. But I think if you made it a bit more like the civilian sector where it's like, oh, man, like if everybody knows I have another job, if I call that dude and I'm like, dude, I'm fucking burned out. We've been running hard for 3.5 years. I'm going to take like 6 to 12 months off. I'll reapply or try to come back in. You know, obviously not taking a paycheck the whole time, but like I'm going to leave for 6 to 12 months. That's a real option at a lot of places, companies, et cetera, as long as you're not leaving on bad footing, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we made it you don't want a revolving door where dudes are like, I quit this week, I'm back next week, I'm quitting it. Like, you know, that's where I think the 1 year thing makes sense. But yeah, anyway, we're a bit off on a tangent. When you make the MOS strength and conditioning, the other issue is that you don't leave a lot of room for progress and progression. So a principle-based approach is great, but then when you start writing doctrine around recovery protocols and rehabilitation protocols and new science emerges that's like, hey, remember how we used to ice shit immediately after you got hurt? That's not a great idea. Well, if that was written into doctrine 10 years ago, good fucking luck changing it. A study could get published and you read it and you're like, yeah, dude, we're not icing anything anymore. Put out a white paper and somebody could go, yes, stop that. That's literally antithetical to doctrine. This has to go through a review board and blah, 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 blah. That goes
yeah, man, that's
changing doctrine. I can speak to that from a personal perspective.
Yeah, man, I'm curious. Matt, like, not to derail, like, keep your mind, but I keep thinking about to, just for the listeners, most of them are American, you guys had to wear whites when coaching, which made no fucking sense to me. That's so fucking dumb. I'm sorry to the fucking Royal Air Force guys listening. I bet he's going to go grab it. It's like wearing my service outfit. Yeah, dude, come on, man. It just kawaii. They're torturing you. But anyway, say what you're going to say.
Yeah, so I can definitely speak to that from a personal perspective. You talking about kind of coming up against doctrine, and icing was kind of one of the things. And you sort of have to be a bit careful how I kind of phrase this. You have to get quite creative around how you interpret the doctrine, and it becomes very like individual led. If you've got, so for me as an ERI exercise rehab instructor, I was a sergeant. I think that's kind of like E7-ish for you guys, and worked for a physio who was like flight lieutenant, maybe squadron leader. So kind of they've got a bit of weight. If they're looking out for you, it's awesome. And if they're on it, if they're interested in the clinical side of things, not just kind of climbing the ladder, then like you can, probably similar to the worlds you guys were in, you can do a lot because you can get a lot of top cover for like why you're doing things. But yeah, 100%, you come up against a lot of things that were written historically. But then and I don't know if this is the case in the US military, as someone that's enlisted, even senior NCO, it can be like a stone wall. You can't say, well, my X years of university and training and stuff says that this isn't a good idea, coupled with research. Tough shit. That was written by senior officer, whoever. Yeah. That's what you're sticking to. So you definitely that.
I've told this story, I think, a few times, but in my first MARSOC team, I was bullshitting with, and I didn't end up staying in this team for very long, and you guys will figure out why. I was bullshitting with the commanding officer of that team before lunch about we were both complaining that we hadn't shot in like too long as training. And I shot in my off time, he didn't. And we had what I thought was a great conversation in the office around how tactical training needed to be restructured so that it was more like physical training, in the sense that we have a gym. I can go to that gym 24 hours a day and I can load up a barbell and do back squats provided by the unit. And it was insane to me. And the consistency was so key to that. And it was crazy to me that I couldn't go check my pistol out, drive over to one of our flat ranges, set up a set of targets and shoot. That's bonkers to me. And I wrote a white paper at lunch. We talked about this in the morning. Mind you, nobody else is in the team. So we're in a phase of training where guys are going to schools and things, and there's typically only a few guys back in the team room. I wrote a white paper at lunch and emailed him the white paper and he was like, yeah, you should write a white paper on that. And I got a negative counseling for jumping the chain of command because I didn't put it through my senior enlisted in the team to then go to him. And it is the only negative counseling I ever got in the military. And, it was so indicative of the lack of ways to change, like affect change at that point in time. Now, granted, that's one guy who was a total cocksucker in a sea of other guys that were not total cocksuckers, but it's indicative of I was writing a white paper on ways to get guys training on the gun more often and doing CQB more often, etc. And that was not physical training, but it's a very similar vein, right? And so one guy could go, I don't even want this fucking white paper. That's a horrible idea. Obviously, of a super successful training company on the idea of consistency being key, it probably should have listened. But in the PT world, I think it's tough. Whereas right now, with a civilian physical therapist, or in Matt's case, the guy bridging the gap between physical therapy and strength conditioning, there's no doctrine there. They're contracted. And it's like, hey, show up and do what you do. You are the subject matter expert. You're responsible for best practices being used. Go forth and do good things. And it takes away a bit of that command structure, which I think is a huge benefit to the organization.
Yeah.
It's super double-edged sword.
Here's a counterpoint. I know many of the H2F instructors or practitioners are, let's say, for lack of a better word, frustrated because commander doesn't want to use them. So does that change if they're part of the military?
Do they
formally?
Suck?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Well,
because when you have dudes that suck, you don't use them either. You're like, fuck that guy. I'm not going to use him.
Well, I'm wondering about what if they're good, but the commander is an idiot?
Oh, that's highly possible. Yeah, that's highly possible. But I don't think that changes when they're active duty.
I suppose you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're always going to use the good people if you're not a total idiot. However, if you are a total idiot, you're not going to use the good people regardless.
So one thing that we were kind of taught through, and G, I don't know if they talked about this when, so just to fill listeners in. So G Exos hosted a group of RAF physical training instructors. Was it like an educational package or something, G? Or
yeah, it was fucking, I will say this, if any of them are listening, feel free to send them this way. I was extremely impressed. Also, I say extremely impressed. Why doesn't the SAS use them? Because there was a huge disconnect. Because what I saw with the SAS was not what Royal Air Force. It's not fucking.
Yes, I mean SF probably like with you guys. SF are a world to kind of to themselves. Really, they sort of can do what they want. And I'm saying this from I had like very very fringe experience with some of the guys in pool, very limited, and that's about the extent of my knowledge of how their system works. But as far as I know, their approach is kind of more like yours, where, okay, we've got as much money as we want to throw at this. We want this guy because he's coaching in like Premier League soccer, or this guy because he's in tier 1 rugby and super experienced, and they're able just to get that. So they can kind of pick and choose a little bit more. I think that, and Brent, I don't know if you kind of meant to touch on this, but the risk from speaking to some of the guys is that you sometimes get people jumping into those roles because they want to enhance their career profile. They want to be in that role for a little period of time and then write a book on how good they were. So you do kind of risk that a little bit. Where was I going, guys? You spoke to forgive me, I've completely lost my train of thought.
Well, for me, I also remember that they were also hamstrung by the difference between. I remember I tried to show them a module on cupping, scraping, and taping, and they're like, "We can't do this." I'm like, "But you should still understand it." Yeah, but we can't do it. So I'm like, "Why are you pushing back?" It's like it's so weird to me.
So that's kind of what I was talking about before, where you have to be a little bit creative. And so the other thing as well, G, is I know that some of the people you met weren't exercise rehab instructors. So some of them were like Brent, so you can kind of connect the dots. Luke, who we're speaking to, he was one of the chaps that G met. And Luke is specialized as an adventure training instructor, or it's called something different now. But basically, like, his subspecialization is teaching people how to kayak and canoe and team building and the psychology behind that side of things. So they have a whole different skill set. So a really interesting thing to kind of think about, or to throw into the discussion. I know this has been really high up on the priority list the RAF has over the years been discussing trying to get rid of physical training instructors as a trade and replace them with civilian contractors. And you come to the kind of the question, well, so what happens with deployments? Like, if you've got, for us, fast jet's kind of still the priority. If you've got a fast jet squadron deploying overseas, you've got a military physio, so she can deploy with them as an officer. But do you need a rehab instructor? If so, like, are you going to have a civilian that signs off to say, yeah, it's okay for me to be mortared? Or are you going to run it gapped? So that idea of like, what happens come deployment, which arguably is kind of when that stuff is really important, having people in there to help with that. I don't know what your kind of your thoughts are on that stuff.
I've always wanted it, man. I've always wanted to get like attached to a unit. Now, I say always, but I mean, as a civilian, as a coach that's developed some expertise, if a unit called, "Hey, Giovanni, we want you to do a pump with us," hell fucking yeah. If you're listening, I'm down, because it sounds so fucking weird and left of field.
Yeah, we would take that contract at Softlead. I don't think any other company would be dumb enough to, but we would.
I think you're right, dude.
Yeah.
I told Exos that, and they're like, we're not going to do that. I'm like, but I'm cool with it.
That's big in Exos.
So it's a little different. But I think that this is something that always bugs me, man. Like, with nothing against civilians. But if you said, "Hey, Giovanni, we want you to do a pump over in Kuwait or whatever," there's a risk of mortar attacks. Okay. Whereas I think for some people, they'd be like, "Oh my God, I can't do that." But it's...
Yeah. Well, so from the other side of the coin then. So Brent, would that service have been useful? I say like service, like having someone question. Like that in that role, would that have been useful?
Yeah, I've bumped into quite a bit where, I did an entire deployment. We had, luckily, on the Air Force, surgical response team that was attached to us. One of those guys was a doctor. He was an osteopath, and he had been a physical therapist before doing that. So we were lucky in that he was super helpful as a physical therapist on deployment. I had broken my left leg right before deployment. I broke it on July 4th. I deployed September 4th. And he was super helpful with my leg and back and neck. Earlier in that workup is when I had been sitting in the backseat of a car that hit a wall in training, driving on night vision. So my neck was already fucked up. Didn't know, but I had 2 herniated discs in my neck, 2 in my back. Where I ran into issues is that was at the time, it wasn't super sexy, but it was a classified deployment, so all of our records didn't come through. Basically, I had 4 months of physical therapy with this guy daily, not daily, but 3-4 days a week, totally undocumented. So kind of fucked me on the way out the door when they're like, oh, you say you're injured, but where's all... And that was the other thing, is our unit physical therapists were not tied into our medical records, at least then, the way they should have been. So in my medical records, all of the times that I went to physical therapy for like real fucking injuries, they're not in there. They just are not in my medical records, which is awesome for the VA, I guess, and the military saving money. Not super awesome for me going like, no, I swear I got into a car accident and went to physical therapy. Yeah, it's a big fucking list. And I mean, the care was amazing. The other thing was we had independent duty corpsmen in our teams at team level. So I went to the hospital after breaking that leg one time. No, I went the day it happened and I went back for MRIs and that's it. The rest of my care was provided by a guy in my team and somebody whose entries didn't go into my medical record. And what they were doing, like, huge credit to MARSOC for this. James Rose, I forget what I think he's the regimental commander. He was my company commander at the time. He brought the physical therapists with us to our certification exercises to deploy to give guys physical therapy on the way out the door. He was broken too, so it was him, myself, and a handful of other guys were doing the training, getting the physical therapy done, and then those guys were getting back. And I don't know if it was a deal where they weren't uploading things because they were so busy. Like, we ran them ragged. We had guys that were always hurt. We ran them ragged. And I don't know if they weren't uploading things the right way or if the systems weren't tied together, because I do remember them taking copious notes into my record that they were keeping, at least, as I went through physical therapy at the unit level. I forget what your question even was. Would we take them on deployment? Fuck yeah. And we kind of had them. And we also had independent duty corpsmen who are insanely intelligent practitioners of medicine, and they don't just do trauma. That's one of the big differences is like a independent duty corpsman practices medicine, not just trauma. Like, they'll do sick call and all of that, whereas a lot of corpsmen in Army Special Forces, and I don't know about like corpsmen that are in NSW. I think most of them are like, I'm not fucking giving you Tylenol when you got a headache, bro. Pound sand. Our guys would. Our guys were like the go-to. They fucking totally took care of you. And if that was them getting smart on physical therapy for your specific injuries and conditions, they would. Like, I watched it happen in real time. Awesome. So yeah, we would definitely take those guys.
So you obviously work with like very performance driven individuals, which makes sense. Like, I feel like I'm not trying to talk myself up, but I would feel a duty to get sped up on as a coach on other methods to make sure that I didn't have any weak links, so to speak. But I'm wondering how that looks for big Army, big Marine Corps, big Navy. I think there's value for having a coach that's embedded into the unit that deploys. And this is a coach, physical therapist, absolutely. Especially the right person. Maybe you can be a coach, but you know a little bit to be dangerous. That's kind of how I see myself. But I'm wondering how that would work, like with a fucking, I don't know, standard 0311 fucking grunt unit, infantry unit. Is there value there? What does that look like?
I think there's value there, but you have a different type of individual there as well. So like I'm trying really hard to not to shit talk the infantry, because that's the backbone of the Marine Corps and the military. And like, special operations is just infantry tactics executed in smaller teams or with Jundies or however you want to look at that. I'm not shit talking infantry guys, but what I will say is that the infantry guys' bottom 10% is a lot lower than the bottom 10% in special operations. So you have a higher number of guys that are going to milk it. Right, they're going to be at physical therapy all the time with like that nagging injury that you're always never shows up on an MRI. They're always like dead fucking last in a run or a swim or a ruck or whatever. Like, they're not doing the extracurriculars to stay in shape. Like, those guys are going to, we used to call them malingerers, but they're going to milk that system a bit more. But part of that is just like on the unit level to police it, right? So if that guy's if your hard ass is the guy that's got some training in physical therapy, etc., maybe that's the move. And it's a bit more of a meat grinder as well. Like, you're not going to get the tenure there, right? Most of those guys are doing a 4-year bid and they're out. And I'm not knocking that. That's just the reality of it. It's a different dynamic. Is it important? Yeah, absolutely, it's important. I think it's also easier. Part of the reason you don't see it is it's easier to backfill a guy. Right. Yeah. There's not a whatever the attrition rate is in special operations selection through pipeline, et cetera. It's a longer process for sure, right? So to get to MARSOC, first and barrier to entry, be in the Marine Corps for 2 years, right? Be a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps. That's the first barrier to entry. That's at minimum a 2-year start to get a guy, right? And then another 2 years of pipeline, bare minimum. And the infantry is like 3 months of boot camp. I don't know what school of infantry is, 3 more months. So let's call it 12 total months, at least half of the flash to bang time of a special unit, right? Probably a quarter in reality of flash to bang time to get a guy through to a special unit.
Yeah, I knew.
My point is you can replace people a lot faster, and there's a bigger pool of talent to go for. Like if your guy gets hurt, you put him in physical therapy, you grab some other dude up to do that. It's not as necessary on deployment.
Really tricky, man, for larger units like that, because I'm thinking of my experience. I was in artillery, and just the amount of shithead, looking back, like it was normal for me then because I was in it, but the amount of shitheads looking back that I worked with, like just fucking turds, man. And I mean that from a character standpoint, and to your point, I mean that from a performance standpoint. If I was a coach, like enlisted, I would go fucking nuts. Yes, they would have the appropriate training, but if they're not executing on the fucking plan I wrote, like who gives a fuck? Yeah. Interesting. But isn't that how it is at any team, really?
It is. Anywhere. What I will say is like I've known dudes. I mean, I was hurt all the fucking time. I was still working, so it affected my team a lot less than some guys that were like hurt and couldn't work. Right. But what I will say is like I am thinking now of a few dudes that I personally knew that were regularly injured or had the same injury that was nagging them regularly, and they really worked to make that not an issue operationally. So they may be at physical therapy regularly when we're in the rear, but they weren't skipping reps, hiking, shooting, doing actual training, FMPs, things like that. They weren't skipping those to go to physical therapy. They were going to physical therapy a shitload when we didn't have anything going on. And me too. Most of us were, so that they could still go do the thing they needed to do. A buddy of mine at a different unit that I was not a part of had told me a story of coming in to get a stitch. So he had taken a piece of frag on a breach that like cut his eyebrow open, like pretty severely. And I'm going to butcher the story a little bit, but they were out doing breaching. He catches a little piece of frag that cuts him open. And you guys know how an eyebrow is, like it fucking gushes blood. He's in full kit. They do the run. They're like, dude, you're fucked up. He's like, no, it's just this little cut. They douse him with water to rinse it out and see. And they're like, oh yeah, it's just a little cut. Run to medical at our unit real quick, have them clean it, suture it, and then like get back out there. And it was they call them like Jane Wayne days, but like you can bring your family on to base and do like, they'll take them to the shooting range or like something. So his team's doing CQB and breaching, and there's a simultaneous Jane Wayne day going on as he tells the story. And they happen to be like in the unit's headquarters, the battalion headquarters, wherever the hell it was. And he comes in. Well, the blood is now back all over his face. It's like in his hand. He's got blood everywhere. But because they had doused it with water and all of his shit's wet, that looks like blood all over his kit. So he's like, dude, I come in and I'm, holding the eye. And I'm like, hi, like waving to people, like can barely see because there's blood. Goes in, gets like 3 stitches or 2 stitches, like barely sewn up. They put a patch on it and they're like, hey, you're good. He like goes back out. He's like, hey, fun, see you later. And like goes back out to like breaching training. And I would say in a lot of units, and to give a lot of infantry guys credit, shitloads of them would be the same way, right? I would say most of them would be the same way, where they're like, hey, I just want to get fixed and then go back to work. Like I'm here to do this thing I love doing, but it's a little bit different of a beast. So, but I think guys would use it more so to stay in the fight than like malingering, if you will.
Here's the notion. Go ahead, Matt.
You go.
Well, I was just going to bring up Brent and, well, all of us, all 3 of us, are thinking of the lens of door kickers. What about support? What about Space Force? Like,
what do you mean? Like, should they get it?
Mentally, they're not thinking, well, because the whole time you were telling that story, I'm thinking, yeah, because, he knows that he doesn't want to he wants to make sure that his team does the best to increase the chances of people coming back home. Whereas with like, if you work in the fucking pharmacy in the Army, that's not really top of mind. Like, oh, I got to make sure I'm pulling my weight so I don't drag anybody else down.
I've never been there, but I would guess that it is. Like I know, like at Softly, we're not killing anybody. Nobody's going home in a box, but
Right. Me neither. Nor Matt.
Yeah.
No one's killing anybody.
Yeah, when Patty is swamped with customer service and Matt taps in or I tap in, there's a communal feel there of like, well, or somebody's on vacation, we pick up the slack. And I would assume like we're very selective on who we hire and keep around, obviously. However, I would assume if you have a tight pharmacy shop in the Army, it'll run in a similar vein, right? Where you're like, yeah, I don't want to be gone all fucking day,
Right.
all the time. I think that permeates into a ton of jobs. I mean, I see it at, the family office type job that I have. You don't want to be totally slacking if you're a good player because the other players on the chessboard have to pick up your work. So as long as you're able to have somewhat of a selective process of who you keep along and holding people accountable and all of that, I think it continues to work.
Matt, what were you going to say? I know my camera's out. I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. So I was going to throw it back the other way and say like, well, instead of maybe instead of looking at it from like the coalface perspective in terms of should you have an S&C coach as an MOS, maybe you kind of go up the chain a little bit and say, well, maybe we have a human performance specialist or whatever you want to term it, that athletic director as an MOS. Maybe that comes from rank. That's like a commissioned position. And with like how, I know I'm always on about this stuff, with how like the use of wearables and like machine learning and how we can so easily now like analyze huge amounts of data so quickly with things. Instead of having one S&C coach, however many 100 people in a hangar doing, okay, today guys, we're all going to do push-ups, down, up, down, up. If instead you kind of give, like Brent was saying, people I think generally want to like help the system. They generally join for a reason. If you give them the empowerment, say, okay, well, these are the systems we have available. You can train whenever you want. You can jump on this nice big wink here. You can jump on this app and it'll tell you what to do. And then you can go and see the physio if you want to. You can go and see the ERI if you have issues. But it almost, and this sounds like kind of buzzword bingo, but it's almost that force multiplier effect where you've now got like one person who can oversee a ton and kind of it's on that individual to make use of those services if they want to have a full career length, if they want to go down that SF line. It's on them to do it. If you switch the focus to that being the MOS, you maybe then have more leverage on a number of fronts rather than like trying to fight it from kind of the bottom up. Sorry, Brent, I know you're itching.
No, I wasn't itching to interrupt at all. I was scratching my mustache on my microphone. I was literally itching. No, that's a great idea. It came to mind like in various organizations, you'll have a secondary duty. And so you could have a billet that you're in charge of a thing and not have it be an MOS. And that could require training, or you could be managing / leading people, or just, being the conduit. And then it makes a bit of sense. But I think there's required training there, right? If you said, hey, you're going to do a 4-year bid as the human performance guy, and I got to reach out. We actually have a guy who's writing articles for Softly. His name's Tyler. He's in, I think, this billet. I need to learn more about it. You're going to be in this billet. You're in charge of human performance as a E6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, for 4 years. We're going to kick it off with you taking an education module, whether that's with Exos or one of the other people that does education. Softly has the module. We just don't have it live to the public, which I think is hilarious. Anyway, you're going to do this education module, and then you're going to manage a stack or a team of physical therapists, strength and conditioning coaches, etc. To me, that seems like the move is not make it an MOS, because now you have too many guys that are unneeded at individual unit level. But if you make it a B billet / a secondary duty, or however you want to call that in your service, I don't know what they all call it, but that makes a lot of sense to me. Is okay. And then now when you are at a squadron, the focus at the squadron, everybody supports the pilot, right? You're in an air unit. It's like the pilot is the fucking guy. And if you can pull a guy in who was a pilot, who maybe now he's got bad eyes or whatever reason he can't fly, and he's in charge of human performance for the pilots, that makes a shitload of sense to me. If you're at a special operations unit and you can grab a guy who was an operator, that starts to make a lot of sense. If you're at a radio battalion, right, and the guy was a radio operator, or whatever it was, to me, that starts to make a ton of sense because they know the deployment cadence, the op tempo, the schedule, all of that, right? So if you were a communicator at MARSOC attached to a team and they've an entire battalion, support battalions, and your support battalion human performance guy is like, oh, shit, I know that this guy is getting run fucking ragged, managing all the radios and crypto and doing all of his stuff. He literally can't go to physical therapy. Like, he doesn't have time to drive 20 minutes over there, sit there for an hour, drive 20 minutes back. I'm going to fucking go to him and squeeze 30 minutes in. I think that would be a game changer. I'm totally making up a bullshit scenario, but I think that could be a game changer if you had people who are like, yeah, I'm in charge of the guy's physical well-being for these next 4 to 5 years, and that's my step down, my backseat, whatever you want to.
I completely agree, and I would be the first to say that's so. Just to kind of set the scene, so the RAF of like the home RAF, Royal Navy, Army, Royal Marines, the RAF are the only one of those services where you go from you're selected to be a physical training instructor before you join up, before you do basic. We're the only ones who that's all we do. Yes, you're a soldier first, all that kind of stuff, but it's really that's all you do. All the other services are you join and do whatever role, and then you're selected to be a physical training instructor. And I think it varies from service to service, whether you're expected to jump back in to whatever your original role was, or whether you stay in like the PTI, physical training, MOS, if you like. So one of the biggest drawbacks from my perspective of what we had is unless you were super driven to do this, as a physical training instructor working with, let's say, FastJet, you have no appreciation of what it's like to fly night sorties over Iraq, as a for instance. I mean, that was my big push to always get a backseat on a MacLoop ride, which unfortunately never happened. But like you haven't got that appreciation. So in your model, Brent, like you're talking about, yes, you maybe take a hit in the fact that you don't have someone who's an all-out specialist and has X number of years experience in education in the PT world, but you do have the experience of what quote unquote real life is like on that squadron, on that unit, which I think is huge from a practical standpoint in terms of knowing how to use your assets, but also the buy-in of the guys using that service. It's not like, well, he doesn't understand what we're doing. They've done that job, which I think is critical.
Yep. And you're going to have a bit of, I want to use the term empathy, but you'll have a better understanding of what the guys are doing to know, like, does this fit in? Does it not fit in?
Yeah, that's huge.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Man, it's fucking weird. See lower level enlisted going in now. It's like, oh my goodness, they look like babies to me. I used to be one of them.
Yep.
All right, well, let's talk, let's wrap up with some action items. I mean, what are the lessons learned here other than just bullshit? So in my mind, I think we need to think more performance oriented. When we think, well, shit, for one, like lowering of fitness standards just because not enough people are making it. Like, it really pissed me off when they cut out pull-ups for women, is as if to say that they can't do pull-ups. Like, I think that's bullshit. And I think most women that can do pull-ups would agree that it's bullshit. But anyway, that all being said, what are we suggesting here as far as a solution? Nuanced solution?
I think it's nuanced, but if you're somebody who's in charge of taking care of the physical well-being of the guys, spinning up on the physical therapy aspects are super important. Nutrition's probably a bit of a play there. And having some relevant information, or arguably more important than that is saying you don't know and figuring out how to get the guys to somebody who does know, right? Nothing's worse than if your information is the food pyramid and you're like, nah, guys, I swear you're supposed to get 12 servings of fucking carbohydrates every day. Load up on this pasta and doing more harm than good. Just say like, you don't know, your knowledge is dated, etc. But if you're in those billets, it's important to either spin up or no, you don't know.
Yeah, that communication piece is massive, and it sounds so cheesy, but like looking out for whatever that person wants and needs, whatever that person you're overseeing needs. And if that's, like you said, Brent, if that's not within your wheelhouse, knowing who and where you can point them is critical.
Have I ever told you guys the Rhabdo dive school story?
No.
Okay, so I got to observe day 2, their in-dock of when a Navy diver goes to dive school. They're getting their shit pushed in, so to speak. And
figuratively, not literally. It is the Navy, so it is the Navy. People.
I love that we share that across nations. I love that.
Hey, of course.
That still works.
Hey, it's Pride Month, baby. Anyway, what was I saying? So anyway, I'm watching it, and it's funny because, firstly, again, to opine on when I was younger, you know, you would always see that civilian guy with the big beard sitting in the golf cart and like, man, what's that guy? Who's that guy? Oh, he must be legit. So it was weird to be on the other side of that. Now I'm in the guy in the fucking golf cart watching training. It was fucking weird. But because I was an outsider, they felt the urge to like hide shit from me. It's like, guys, I don't give a fuck. Like, I'm not here to make your fucking training soft. Anyway, I saw these kids. I saw these kids getting destroyed on land. Later on, I saw them in the pool. And there was this larger guy. He must have been around 220, 230 pounds. And he was struggling, really struggling. I found out like a week later, that guy got dropped because he got rhabdo. And the thing that pissed me off about that is I also heard he was told that he needed to eat less. He needed to get lighter. So somewhere along the line, some fucking ass, I'm just going to call him out, some asshole told him that he just needs to eat salad. And I remember that. He was told to eat salad, no fucking carbs. And of course he got fucking rhabdo. Of course he did.
You're striking a nerve for me here.
Yeah, well, where's your head at, Brent? It just pissed me off because I was an 8-year vet that you fucking dropped and you damaged his kidneys to an undetermined amount because I didn't fucking look at his report because of misinformation because you didn't know what the fuck you were doing. It just pisses me off.
I had a teammate for a fitness challenge who was doing Softly programming, but he was getting his nutrition advice not from Softly. And his nutritionist, who was a nutritionist at a military unit, I believe it was at a military unit, not Exos. We're going to throw this military unit under the bus instead of Exos, but it may have been Exos. Told him that all of his carbs should be coming from vegetables. And so we did a, ballpark 10-hour fitness challenge endurance thing. It was a swim. There was a fin, so a swim with fins on, a run, pull PT, like a push-up, calisthenics circuit, another run type of course over the course of, I think, 10 hours roughly. And about 8 hours in, he cramped up super fucking hard because he was like, oh, I don't eat pasta. I get all my carbs from bell peppers, which is the fucking dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
That wasn't an Exos dietitian. No. They're all about peanut butter jelly sandwiches. It's fine.
Most of the ones that I've met have been, and this was the California. He was in a unit in California, and I know he was training at Exos a lot, which is why I say it may have been, but I'm pretty sure it was the unit. And he wasn't big. This isn't even like a dude that was, a chonky boy, and they're like, bro, you got to cut out some of this pasta. This is a guy actively training all the time in good shape objectively, and they had fed him that same line. It's been a while, but when keto was like first going, there were a lot of guys at various units that were asking us about going keto or paleo or whatever it is over the years. And so we talked a ton about food source availability. And it's like, dude, on a deployment, you're not getting enough carbohydrates out of vegetables. It's just not happening. So, and it works great if you're only PTing for an hour or two. What your physical output is going to look like. That's not any real deployment. It's not that, right? Just in one night, I was thinking about this with regards to shooting and fatigue and shooting under fatigue. But in a night, let's say you're going to do what everybody who argues against endurance for special operations guys is like, well, if you're just going to land, at the front door in the helicopter, blow that door, go in, shoot the bad guys and leave, you don't need endurance. Well, if your night starts like that and then you find a handwritten note in that guy's house that's like, the other bad guys are at this house 2 kilometers away. Well, guess what, buddy? You're not taking a fucking helicopter. And there's plenty of times where the handwritten note you find in that guy's house that's like, bad guys are 2 kilometers away, happens 12 times in a fucking night. And now you've just pulled a accidental 12K. Like, I'm not making that scenario up. I've done that multiple times where it's like, yeah, we got an easy one. And then helicopters can't land super close. You brought extra ammo and not extra water. And now you're fucking walking for 15K, right? Like, that happens actually quite a bit. So,
dude, you're reminding me of firefighters here and how many fucking times they have to go on Camelback Mountain, North Mountain, like just rescuing people in Paiwesta. Yeah. They have to do multiple rescues a day.
I was talking to a cop buddy and he was like, I was talking with him because he was unhappy with the way one of his PT tests went. He's a police officer and he's in the National Guard as an SF guy. And he was like, man, I'm not stoked with my 2-mile time. So I was asking what his training looked like. He does he owns a training company and does his own physical training. I was like, oh, your weak link there is just slow long distance, right? Like he's not hitting enough zone 2, really not enough zone 3. It's very hard sprint work is what he's been doing. He's like, man, I thought getting older, like run slow, you'll be slow. And I'm like, that's true to an extent. Like if you're only running slow, that becomes true, but you need more of that. And he was talking about how all of these guys are like, well, you're driving, you're serving a warrant, like you're not needing to run. And he's like, dude, I've been in 20-minute long fucking foot pursuits. And he's like, it's 20 minutes of an obstacle course trying to chase some asshole down who's not wearing body armor. He doesn't have a radio, maybe doesn't even have a pistol. And he's like in his fucking sneakers hoofing it, and you're trying to keep up and coordinate with your buddies and all of that. So my point is on the nutrition side, because you really fucking struck a chord there, it doesn't always apply when we're talking about sport. The crossover to tactical is not one-to-one.
And that's before you even consider like using it from a therapeutic perspective, before you even start factoring that stuff in.
Yep. All right. I think we're bumping into time, G.
Yes, we are. All right. I think this is a great place to finish. Gentlemen, any parting thoughts? Brent, I think you're good. All right. Okay. Well, listeners, well, maybe you're welcome for not having to look at my ugly mug anymore for the rest of this episode. But you guys have a great day. Die living.